Hello, my name is Lee Howells and this is episode 9 of Fireworks in the Real World. Now this week, and I promise this is going to be the last week that I'm looking at these kind of individual design bits and bobs, like I've looked at the design tools and masks, and this week I'm going to have a quick look at the vector tools and the path tools that are available in Fireworks. And I'm going to do this because it is a growing trend in the web design world, especially, of a kind of flat approach to interface design. So flat panels and tiles, and a use of icons and vector artwork. It's becoming trendy and relevant, not just because Microsoft created the Metro, whatever the interface is called now, this flat interface, which has become very popular in terms of look and feel, and Apple are supposedly implementing a similar thing for the next version of iOS. But also because of responsive design and not knowing how wide your viewport's going to be. So vector artwork which scales smoothly is it's a real advantage to creating a seamless design across all these different viewports. So it's very relevant that you get to know how to use path and vector tools, and Fireworks has a very good set of tools. I mean, it's not Illustrator. It hasn't got the full extent of a big vector art package like Illustrator, but it's very powerful. And until very recently, I realised I wasn't even using it. I wasn't using a fraction of the tools and the power that it had hidden away. So that's what I'm going to look at this week. Now, I haven't forgotten our good old pet shop design. So we had the wireframes and the mood boards. I had a couple of mood boards, and we had a complete kind of wireframe of the outline of the site. Next week, when I'm going to kind of show this being designed up, I'm going to be using some of these things like masks and a lot of vector artwork. So it's all kind of relevant, and more on the actual back to the design on this next week, and we'll simulate what the client has been doing in this time whilst we've not been looking at it. So let's get on with the vector tools. Let's create a new document. Okay. So we start off. I mean, the good thing about Fireworks, and when I use Photoshop, is most of what I did in terms of creating interface elements, I was using bitmaps the whole time, because that's the way that Photoshop kind of led you to work. The tools on the left, they were normal things you might see, shape tools, etc., and you drew them, and they became bitmap elements. So whenever I drew a rectangle, I drew a bitmap rectangle, which had problems because it never if you chose to rescale things later on, things would slowly get munged around, and edges wouldn't be quite as clean as they could have been. And yeah, Photoshop has vector tools and path tools, but they never quite felt well. I didn't use them, so there must have been something wrong with the way they were being presented. But anyway, Fireworks, I now do everything as vectors. So whenever I draw anything, simple shapes or complicated shapes, I'm doing it in vector form. So of course the file size is smaller, and you can always go back and edit these objects and scale them without any kind of mashing them up going on. So the basic vector tools, as we'll see we've had a quick look at these before. We've got line work, paths, we've got a whole range of objects with all different kinds of control points on them, and I've showed you the rounded rectangle, but a lot more of them have hidden depths. So whenever you see a round control point, oops, and I'm not pressing on it. Sorry, whenever you see a yellow control point, you can edit that control point and interact with the objects. But if we look at I'm going to look at the pen tool and actually draw some vector objects now. So this is the standard Bezier tool. It's a very useful thing to learn how it works. And it's basically a click and a drag which creates a curve, and double clicking ends the curve, or if it clicks back, if you start or end on the point you started, it just kind of auto closes. So that's the basic path. Now what we need to do is have a look at the path panel. Now there's a lot of stuff in here. We've already looked at the combining paths, which also appear down in the properties panel. But there's a lot more in the path panel that's very, very useful. And this is some of the stuff which I hadn't looked at until last year, really. The basic form of the path is edited with the subselection tool, or you can press A on the keyboard. So pressing A gives you a white mouse pointer. If you press V, you get the standard what do I actually call it? The pointer tool. So V is the pointer tool, A is the selection tool. So if we press A, we can then manipulate individual points on the curve that we've drawn, and we can manipulate these handles, and these handles control the curvature of that point. And that's one of the things we can change on the path panel. When we drew that Bezier curve, we kind of started with smooth curved points, but you can do things on the path panel like sharpen those points. You've got to select two. To select multiple points, you click on one point, you press shift and press on another, or you can click and drag and you select the points you've dragged over. Now you'll see they're solid blue, and the unselected nodes or points are little white boxes, so you can see they're not selected. So then we can do things like sharpen them. So rather than having, we now get different handles. Well, it's not showing very clearly, but that's actually a different type of point now. You can see you can take it to a sharp point rather than a smooth curve. You can also do a whole range of adding additional points with this toolbar. So we can add a series of extra nodes or points by choosing the number of pixels we want between our points that we've selected, and as you can see, it now creates a whole set of new points to edit and mess around with. Now we've got, under the alter paths options, we can simplify our shape, and that will kind of smooth off the path and take out any unnecessary points. So if I drew a very kind of complicated I'll show you a quick way of creating a complicated path, because if you use this tool here, the freeform tool or the reshape area tool, I use freeform, you can actually kind of draw and erase. If you drag off your vector shape, you're adding to it, and if you drag into it, you're kind of erasing it. So this is a way of creating really complicated vectors very quickly, and you'll see the number of blue points that are being added, just how many points are now on that outline. So if I select that and select simplify paths, you can see you can reduce the complexity using the simplify paths option. You can do a lot more in here. You can actually expand the width of the path, do all kinds of things, mitering and changing the way the endpoints look, and change all the corners. You can create inset paths, which actually add paths within your path. That's really not the right shape to be showing it on. Let's create another shape. Let's get rid of these, create a very nice simple shape. Oop. So if I did 40, you'd see, yeah, it's basically shrinking the path. Or you can go outwards as well. Another thing you can do, reversing the contours will... No, it's the wrong shape to show it. And let's draw a nice simple shape. Okay, if you don't drag, you just draw a boxy shape with straight corners rather than curvy handled Bezier corners. So if I now do expand path. So if you could make multiple copies of these basically, and if you expanded the path by however much, you could create a whole set of paths. So if I coloured that one differently, for example, and sent it to the back, so range center back, you can see, you could imagine if you had text and you wanted a very dramatic kind of set of outlines of the text, you could use that tool rather than just creating bigger versions of the text which wouldn't match up, because text, of course, it's all vector as well. So if you type in whatever, let's quickly do this. Let's create some nice big type. Nice bold type. Press Apple T to enlarge it. So you need to convert to paths once you're happy with your text. It's not going to recognize, Fireworks doesn't recognize it until you convert it to a path. But now you could use that tool. I don't know why it's not actually. Oh, you need to ungroup it. That's right. I always forget that. So now if you select it, now you can expand the paths or decrease the paths so they go within the shape. But if you wanted a nice bit of blocky a blocky shape to go behind your type, then that's how you do it. Oops. But of course, you probably best to create another version. Let's just do this. Do this, Lee. Okay. Colour that in. Send it to the back. There you go. So that's a way of getting nice vector paths around objects. Other things on here, you can use path state basically like an undo list, so you can actually save how your path is currently looking, and at any point you can restore it. I've rarely used that. Now some nice things down here on the second row. Invert paths, well that just does what it says. If I drew a star and did invert path, basically you see I've now got the whole thing kind of knocked out of the whole page. That next one, oops, let's actually draw a star again. I like stars for demonstrating things. So the Extrusion Tool, again you need to ungroup preset vector polygons in the vector tool thing. So if we extrude now, we get the little toolbar. Never actually used this, but maybe one day I will. Actually, it's probably easier if it's not coloured in. If I just, you can't really see what's happening if it's. Oh, what am I doing? Let's actually give it some line work colour. There, well that's a nice complicated shape, but it all remains editable, so you can fiddle about with it. And maybe there's a lovely creative logo use in there somewhere. That's the Extrusion Tool. Blend Tool's quite nice. Draw two simple shapes. I'll draw a couple of nice curves. Oh, double click to end. And then you have to select them both and you do blend. Give it a number of steps. Let's leave it at 20. I don't want to flatten them afterwards, no. And then it will draw the line works that go from one to the other, and that can give some kind of nice pleasing effects. You can add a fisheye. Let's just demonstrate that with a bit of text again. So if I convert that to paths, and don't forget to ungroup it, then you have to draw a... If I draw an ellipse over the top of it, this acts as the fisheye, from what I remember. Let's just try grouping that again, because... Okay, okay, so you don't have to ungroup the text. Is it going to work? Is it doing anything? I think it's trying. Might have given it a bit too much work to do here. There you go. So it uses that shape in the foreground to act as the fisheye lens, and as you can see, it's warped the text accordingly. Another nice one that I use quite a lot actually is this one here, the Deformed Path. So imagine I drew an arrow. Well, don't imagine. You can actually see me drawing an arrow. There you go. Arrow. Not a very good arrow, but you get the idea. And then I draw a simple path. I want this arrow to bend. I don't want to waste my time drawing bendy arrows. Don't forget to double click. And if I select both and then deform to path, you can tell it how strong to be. Let's just keep it at the default. There you go. I now have a nice bendy arrow, so that could be useful. There's various options about snapping to pixels in both the edit points and the alter paths. Fill rule, that can be quite interesting. Well, not that interesting if you draw a Bezier shape. It just sets the difference between how it fills. So the basic fill rule is the even odd fill rule, but then there's also this thing called a non-zero winding fill rule, which on that particular shape is making no difference at all, but you'll see it better if I do two circles. So if I combine those circles, there you go. So that's the standard fill. It doesn't do the bit in the middle basically. But if you do the non-zero, it does do the bit in the middle. Potentially useful. Now another thing I haven't covered on here, there's a whole set of different options for selecting points. So you can either, I think that one of these selects all of them, select all points, so now they're all selected. That will select no points, it'll select the first point, although you need a path for that because there's no start or end on a circle, or maybe it does choose one. It looks like it does choose an arbitrary point. And then it will do the inverse of that first point, so every other but the first point. That will select the whole thing. Now this one's interesting. This will, if you select one point, you can then expand. You can either select the next point, so you can see it's now gone here. You can keep going round, so I'm going round the circle. You can go the other way as well, so it kind of goes left and right from the point you're on. So there you go, I've now selected all four. Or you can deselect in the same way. So the outside one is select and the one next to it is deselect. So you can kind of go along. If you've got really complicated paths, it's quite a useful way of selecting things without having to click around. Let's just try and draw the right shape to demonstrate again. So if I select that one, I then can select along the line, and you see it's selecting as I go. But another thing you can do is select all the points in the top left or the top right, which is an interesting concept on a wiggly shape like that. All the points in the bottom left or bottom point, so I've selected just the points down there. I think it depends on the shape how it interprets what is top left. But you get the idea. So they're useful little selection tools in here. Now I've already had a quick look at the freeform tool. The reshape area tool is quite interesting. It's very similar to the freeform tool, but it does a kind of rubbery effect and takes some of the points with it, so that can be nice for creating interesting shapes. Then there is the path scrubber tool. Now I think you need a path which is, so if I use the brush types, I need an airbrush. I won't fill it in. Let's get it nice and wide so we can see what's happening. You change the thickness of the line work in effect with that tool. Let's just create another path again. It's always the case of having the right kind of shape to demonstrate these things. Let's not join it up, that's the problem. Don't join it up because it'll kind of make it solid. So if you just got a line object, the path scrubber tool will let you where'd you start? You start subtractive, that's why. Yeah, that line was as scrubbed as it could be. It was full kind of strength, because this is an airbrush. So if I do a subtractive scrubbing, you can see you can affect. Imagine you had different pressures as your airbrush was moved around. This lets you scrub the path to simulate different pen pressures on the page. So the only other useful tool, potentially useful, is the knife tool, which just lets you kind of slice through things. So you slice through the shape, and then it's different parts. And some of these point editing tools allow you to select multiple points and join this thing back up again. So if you select that one and that one, I'll drag around them, and then you join points. I thought I did, but it will join these points together. There you go. And there's all kinds of extra complicated options in here for creating evil length handles on those Bezier curves and making the handles tangential to the path. Potentially useful depending on what you're doing, but it's well worth exploring all these options and trying them out, because they might just be the thing that makes your vector work a lot easier. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about vector paths this week, and I'm going to be using those to create some icons for the pet shop. Now, useful to note that Fireworks by default doesn't export things like SVG. Now there are various tools you can use to create font icons on the web. Some of them take SVG, which is a vector file format. But you can get plugins for Fireworks that export your vector objects as SVG that allow you to create font files. So they're the kind of things that on the pet shop I will use to do all the icons rather than using bitmaps. I'm going to use an icon set just for the pet shop. So whatever size we look at it, it'll always be smooth. Okay, thank you very much. Next week, as I said, we'll be looking at the pet shop design and getting on with it. Until then, thanks very much.